A tomboyish 9-year-old girl who prefers to go by the name Benny is a problem. We first see her bruised and battered, being examined by Dr. Neiman. Naturally, the sight of a little girl with injuries sends off all kinds of alarm signals. However, when the doctor mentions that she's planning to increase Benny's medication dosage to help her stay in control when she gets angry, it becomes clear that Benny is her own worst adversary. When asked about her aspirations for the future, Benny smiles and responds, "An educator," she says. The film then transitions to another scene where Benny is seen screaming and viciously fighting in the playground of the latest group home from which she is about to be expelled. She lashes out, punching and spitting at her educators when they attempt to intervene in a fight. They leave her outside the building to calm down, but she remains enraged. She resorts to swearing at her classmates, calling them all kinds of names, and starts hurling large toys at the glass door. As the enraged Benny continues throwing large toys at the glass door, one adult supervisor reassures another, "Don't worry, it's shatterproof." However, the glass succumbs to Benny's force, shattering as the film's title appears in pink over the scene. From the outset of the film, we learn that Benny embodies a hyper-aggressive whirlwind of defiant impulses, spewing contempt and antisocial violence. Regardless of the institution she is placed in, she is promptly expelled, earning her the label of a system crasher by Child Welfare Services. Following her latest outburst incident, she faces suspension once again, and numerous institutions have refused to accept her due to her reputation. Informed that she will be placed in an emergency shelter until another institution agrees to take her in, Benny vehemently expresses her desire to return home to her mother. However, she is informed that this is not possible, leading to her becoming upset and deciding to run away. She starts causing trouble in the neighborhood for what she believes will be the last time. Channeling her frustrations, Benny lashes out at those around her, hurling insults at elderly individuals, engaging in shoplifting, and even getting into a confrontation with a group of boys who threaten to touch her face, which they ultimately do. It's during this altercation that we uncover Benny's aversion to being touched on her face, stemming from a traumatic incident in her early childhood. She was suffocated with diapers by one of her mother's boyfriends, leaving her deeply scarred. Consequently, Benny harbors a profound reluctance towards anyone touching her face, aside from her mother. Any attempt to do so by others is guaranteed to trigger her. The following day, Benny is escorted to an emergency shelter by Mrs. Baffin from Child Protection Services. Mrs. Baffin stands out as one of the few individuals who hasn't given up on Benny, relentlessly striving to secure her a stable place Benny can call home. Despite Benny's troubled history of being expelled from numerous foster homes, Mrs. Baffin remains determined to advocate for her, even though other institutions refuse to accept her without giving her a chance. After many fruitless attempts, Benny finally secures a temporary placement in a group home, where she is assigned to an anger management trainer and school escort named Michael Heller. Michael's responsibility is to ensure Benny's attendance at school and accompany her to classes, providing support and assistance in managing her behavior. This proves to be an impossible task, as Benny adamantly refuses to attend school. On her first day at the new shelter, Benny learns that Michael will be her new school escort, much to her displeasure, leading her to angrily dismiss him and instruct him to leave her room. Later that evening, Benny manages to escape from the shelter and hitchhikes home, where she discovers her younger siblings alone and watching horror films without supervision. Despite her own troubles, Benny shows a caring side by switching the channel to something more appropriate for children and prepares food for her siblings, disregarding her brother's objections. When Benny's mother, Lisa Hagmasite, returns with her current boyfriend, Benny initially feels elated to see her. However, her mood quickly sours upon seeing her mother's boyfriend named Jens. Lisa had previously claimed that Jens had left the house and they had broken up, which was a lie. Feeling betrayed by her mother's lie and overwhelmed by the presence of Jens, Benny erupts in anger. She confronts Jens, brandishing a vase in her hand and demanding he should leave. They cause a small chaos. Benny's mother tries to call Benny's social home shelter to come and get her, but she gets attacked by her daughter with a vase. Benny hits her mother on her back and her face with the vase, prompting Jens to intervene. Jen strikes Benny and confines her in a wardrobe, while Lisa calls the police for assistance. Upon the police's arrival, they release Benny from the wardrobe, and she immediately seeks comfort in her mother's arms. However, she is subsequently returned to the group home. The next morning, she adamantly refuses to attend school. Armed with a knife, she threatens anyone who approaches, even threatening to cut her throat if they don't keep their distance. Michael, witnessing the scene, empathizes with Benny's plight and accompanies her to the hospital where she is sedated and evaluated. Reflecting on the situation, Michael empathizes with Benny, seeing parallels between her struggles and his own experiences with anger management issues during his youth. Upon returning from the hospital, Benny is persuaded by Michael to attend school through a bet. If Benny wins a game of table soccer, she'll get to drive Michael's car, but if Michael wins, Benny must go to school. Michael emerges victorious, and Benny reluctantly complies, with Michael accompanying her to class. However, Benny's participation is short-lived as she violently assaults another girl who had provoked her by calling her stupid. Benny slams her classmate's face onto the table and leaves the girl with a nosebleed. Following further aggressive outbursts, Benny is readmitted to the hospital for tests and prescribed new medication, this time accompanied by her mother. After returning from the hospital, Michael and Benny share a brief moment of bonding, during which Benny reveals pictures of her past placements experiences and families she has been kicked out of. Recognizing Benny's potential during her calmer moments, Michael proposes taking her to a cabin he owns in the woods, where he has previously assisted young offenders with rehabilitation through 3 weeks of farm work, fresh mountain air, and personalized attention. Initially met with skepticism from other caregivers who have exhausted conventional methods like therapy and medication, but nothing seems to work. However, after some time of convincing, Michael's proposal eventually gains acceptance. After one of the caregivers has even suggested sending Benny to Kenya, Africa, saying they've been successful results for children like Benny there, but everyone ultimately agrees to Michael's unconventional approach, and they set off together. Michael takes Benny on a vacation to stay in the woods, a place devoid of electricity, heating, and distractions or taunts from other children. Despite a rocky start, where Benny struggles with the concept of a back-to-basics lifestyle without electricity, things soon take a positive turn. Benny forms connections with the forest and its inhabitants, particularly drawn to the barn owl. She finds solace in the echoes of the forest, with her longing for her mother being her most cherished echo. She yells for her mother in the echoes of the forest repeatedly till she gets tired. As Benny's behavior begins to shift positively, Michael forms a strong bond with her, offering a glimmer of hope for her future. However, this hope is short-lived, as Benny's own condition ultimately seals her fate, leaving our hearts heavy with disappointment once again. When they return to the city, Benny's tantrums resurface once again, after Michael instructs her to exit the car and return to the group home. Desperate to avoid going back, Benny pleads with Michael to take her to his home, but he firmly refuses. In her distress, she begins screaming and violently bangs her forehead against the car window, drawing blood. Succumbing to her cries and self-harm, he goes against his proper protocol. Michael reluctantly allows Benny to spend one night at his home with his pregnant wife, Ellie, and their newborn baby. Benny begins to view Michael as a father figure and, at one point, asks if he can be her father and if they can be a family. Michael, maintaining his boundaries, explains that he already has a family. Benny, unfazed, provocatively questions whether Michael would adopt her if she killed his wife and child. Michael brushes off the question and tells her to go to sleep. Benny refuses and starts calling him Papa, which Michael will not allow. Michael soon realizes he is losing his professional distance and mentions he has what he calls rescue fantasies, an idealistic dream that he can change Benny for the better. They return to the home shelter, and yet again everyone is back to square one with Benny, and it once again feels as though no progress has been made with her, and her caregivers worry that maybe no progress will ever be made. Michael fears that he has developed a dangerously close bond with Benny, and she even knows where his family lives now. Michael says he would like to take a step back on Benny's case, but Mrs. Baffin persuades him to continue, as there are so few people on Benny's side. They continue taking care of Benny, and despite their continued efforts, including various activities such as playing, studying, exercising, and Benny's favorite pastime, ice skating, progress remains minimal. Sometime later, Benny's mother, Lisa, informs her and the social workers that she has permanently parted ways with her abusive boyfriend and plans to bring Benny back home soon. Lisa assures her daughter that they will be a family once again, filling Benny with hope. However, when she arrives at one of the few case meetings she actually attends, Lisa goes back on her word and reneges on her promise, leading Benny to spiral into self-harm as she grapples with the disappointment of her mother's betrayal. Benny's mother abruptly leaves the meeting, confessing to Mrs. Baffin outside that she cannot bring Benny back into their home. In their private conversation, Lisa reveals she fears her own daughter, Benny, and expresses concern that her two younger children could be negatively influenced if Benny were to return. Feeling overwhelmed, Lisa expresses her frustration to Mrs. Baffin, questioning how is she supposed to handle Benny if even the experts struggle with her. Disheartened and defeated, Lisa decides to give up and leaves without bidding her daughter a final farewell goodbye. Mrs. Baffin comes back inside the home shelter, and she breaks down in tears as she has to tell Benny of yet another disappointment. And now we see the child comforting the adult as she cries. Benny seeks solace with her former foster mother, holding on to hope that she might find stability there if she can control her behavior. However, this hope is shattered when Benny gravely injures another foster child during a skating accident. While ice skating, Benny fell, and the child she was skating with fell on top of her, and he accidentally touched Benny's face, causing her to lash out. Following her anger outburst, Benny repeatedly strikes the child's head against the ice, resulting in both of them being hospitalized. During her winter hospital stay, Benny's caregivers and Michael commemorate her birthday, bringing a moment of joy and significance to her life once more. As a temporary solution, Benny is placed back in the emergency shelter, while the option of sending her abroad to Kenya is revisited again as a last resort with unanimous agreement among the caregivers this time. Upon learning about this plan, Benny flees to Michael and his family during the night. The next morning, Ellie discovers Benny sleeping outside under a chair while taking out the trash. Ellie brings Benny inside, despite Michael's initial reluctance due to concerns about social workers searching for Benny. Benny asks to stay at Michael's house for the night, like the last time. Michael refuses, but after some persuasion from Ellie, Michael agrees. Benny enjoys a warm bath at Michael's house and shares dinner with the family before they all retire to bed. In the morning, while Ellie and Michael are still sleeping, Benny goes into their bedroom and lifts the baby from his crib, takes him downstairs, and carefully gives him breakfast. When the baby unwittingly touches Benny's face, she does not object. She smiles and plays with the baby. Ellie wakes up and starts looking for her baby. She comes down to the kitchen and finds Benny holding the baby. It seems like she knows about Benny's condition as she tries to retrieve him, but Benny refuses and insists that the baby wants to stay with her instead of the mother. Ellie keeps trying to take the baby from her, but Benny continues to refuse. As tensions escalate, Benny refuses to give up the baby and becomes aggressive. In a panic, Benny runs with the baby and locks herself in the bathroom. Fearing for the baby's safety, Ellie wakes Michael to come and intervene. Despite Michael's attempts to persuade Benny to open the door, but Benny remains adamant, believing that the baby wants to stay with her. Michael eventually breaks down the door, but by the time he does, Benny has fled through the window, leaving the baby unharmed in the bathtub. Michael tries to chase after her, but he gets outrun by the little girl. They stop and stare at each other for a while, and then Benny continues running again. Benny flees into the nearby woods. It's cold and she's only wearing her nightclothes and socks. She starts exploring the woods for some time. And then she collapses and experiences a series of confusing and disjointed dreams that defy explanation. Hours later, Benny is discovered alone and hypothermic. She is rushed to the hospital for treatment. Eventually, the day arrives for Benny to be transferred to a mental institution outside of Germany. Tearfully, Benny and Mrs. Baffin say farewell to each other as Benny prepares to board a plane bound for Kenya. Accompanied by another social worker, Benny attempts to flee while checking in at the airport. She escapes to an elevated maintenance platform. With a smile on her face, Benny leaps into the air, marking the final shot of the film. The frame freezes and then shatters like broken glass. The ultimate fate of Benny remains uncertain as the film ends, leaving viewers to speculate whether she leaped to her death. I know, although a happy ending is initially expected for this film, but it is not the case. The film almost ends with an anticlimax, leaving most viewers hanging and wondering what happens next. Some are left confused and disappointed with the ending, expecting some closure but not getting any. But this is the point of the film, to show us that in the case of Benny, there might not ever be a happy ending. I also believe that the reason why the writers left us with such an opening ending is to allow us viewers to project our own optimism or pessimism about Benny's future. With that said, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more videos like this. See you on the next one.